Welcome to A Mick, a Mook, and a Mike, hosted by Billy O'Connor and Frank Pace, featuring Cowboy Joe West.
This week's guest, five-time Emmy nominee, co-star of shows Murphy Brown, Hope and Faith, actress Faith Ford.
My brother Frankie, how are you today, pal? How you doing? I'm really good. We've got Faith Ford on today, Emmy Award winner. She's a terrific actress and a terrific gal. She'll be a great interview. She wrote a cookbook, too. She wrote a cookbook as well. About the kind of cuisine I like. Which is? New Orleans cuisine. Well, in that mode, Joe West is with us again today. Way out west. So why don't you bring on Joe, country music star. And hey, Joe, how are you? There he is.
Good.
Country music star, baseball umpire par excellence. And what are you going to talk about today? You're talking about the first time you appeared at the Grand Ole Opry.
Oh, that was a nice thing. You know, there was a guy that produced all the hee-haws. His name was Sam Lavello.
And his son is the manager of the Torey Lavello is the manager of the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Yes, he is. In fact, it's really funny. After Sam and this guy named Tex Switson put together my appearance on the Grand Ole Opry, his kid came to bat as a minor league player for the Yankees. And I'm umpiring home plate, and he says, my dad said I better say hello to you. I said, well, who's your dad? He said, Sam Lavello. Oh, really? How's he doing? Everything okay? We started talking, and finally the catcher looked at me and said, can we play? But
that catcher never made it to the bigs, did he?
No, he didn't make it. But Sam Lavello and Tex Switson got me on this fundraiser on the Grand Ole Opry. It was for a Catholic school in Nashville. And the leader of the band was Hall of Famer Charlie McCoy, a harmonica player who has his own band, but he was the leader of the Hee Haw band. And they've had, all these acts that were there: Loretta Lynn, Ricky Van Shelton, Kathy Mattea, Vic Damone sang. He was there, and it was an unbelievable show. And I sang one song. The Boxcar really introduced me. How about that? That's a name out of the past. And I got to perform with the Hee Haw band. It was really unique. And the first thing I did, knowing who Charlie McCoy was I walked up to him and I said, Charlie, you mind playing the intro on my song and the first turnaround? And he turned around to the band. He said, we finally found someone who knows something about music. so he played the intro on Don't It Make You Want to Go Home for me to sing on the Grand Ole Opry. It was really unique, really a lot of fun.
Wow.
That's awesome.
In your baseball career, how many country music guys showed up at ballparks and won tickets?
Well, there was a bunch of them. I can remember when this upstart band was playing at Gilley's in Pasadena, Texas, and Mickey took us backstage and introduced us to him. And then the next day I get to the ballpark, and it's a Sunday afternoon game, and they're standing outside in the heat. And it was this singing group called Alabama. And I said, what are you boys doing out here? He said, well, Rick Sutcliffe left us tickets, but we can't get them yet. They're not up yet. I said, come on with me. So I took them downstairs to the umpire's locker room. Now they've been standing out in heat for probably 30, 40 minutes. They drank every beer in the umpire's locker room. So I asked the clubhouse attendant, Barry Waters, I said, Barry, we need some more beer. Then we're out of beer. So he went and got more beer. And just before we walked on the field, he said, do you know how hard it is to get more beer for the umpires before the game? You know how
That's a great line.
But yeah, that was my first meeting with Alabama. And we were talking about Tex Switson earlier. Alabama had just come out with their first hits, and Gilley's management people, Sherwood Crier, had hired them to play at Gilley's for $2,500. Now, the crazy thing about that was they'd already had a #1 hit, but they had signed this contract where they had to fulfill it. So they had to play Gillies twice for like $2,500 when they're getting $25,000 somewhere else. And during that time, Willie Nelson had started his picnic. And, the 4th of July picnic for Farm Aid and all that stuff.
Right.
So Willie couldn't get any artists to show up to help him with the picnic. So he called Merle Haggard, who was managed by Tex Whitson. And Tex said, well, I tell you what, we'll do your Farm Aid if you'll do our show in Anaheim. We'll do your show for free. You do our show for free. Well, Willie, he's not stupid. He says, well, if I get Merle Haggard, I can get anybody I want. So when he announced that Merle Haggard was going to be there, he got all kinds of people from rock and roll to pop to everything to play at his picnic. And so it worked out well for him. So when he went to do the show in Anaheim, the opening act was this upstart band called Alabama. And they didn't realize how big this was going to be, because the opening act was going to be Alabama. The second act was going to be Emmylou Harris, and then Willie Nelson, and then Merle Haggard, right? So when Alabama showed up, they went right to Tex Whitson and says, where's our dressing room? And Tex said, you're standing in it. and then they said, where's our money? We want our $2,500. And Tex said, I'm not giving you $2,500. And the boys stepped back like, okay, we're going to have a little problem here. He said, I'm going to give you $5,000 for being here because we're sold out. So he doubled their fee, knowing what was going on. They'd already had hits and everything. So he doubled their fee and I actually asked Emmylou Harris, I said, did he double your fee? And she said, hell no, he didn't. But anyway, that was the act in Anaheim, and that was the largest paid venue for a country show in the world at the time. I don't think anybody's ever exceeded it again, but it was in Anaheim Stadium, and people still talk about it. There's videos of it on the internet where the people were upstairs jumping up and down, and the whole upper deck was shaking. They actually asked the people to stop jumping up and down because they were afraid it was going to collapse. But it was unbelievable show, and these are the kind of, all those guys are good friends. Willie was good friends with Merle. Merle was good friends with Ernest Tubb. All those guys, they played off of each other, and I can remember going to shows that Merle did with Bonnie Owens and Strangers when they would be the last act that played because they had the biggest band. They worked with George Jones, Conway Twitty, and the closing act was Merle Haggard. And the reason Merle was the last act was because his band was bigger than everybody else's, and that's how they had to set up to get everybody on and off the stage. But this music thing's been a lot of fun for me. I mean, I've gone all over the country. I sung at the Palomino Club in LA with Gilly and Johnny Lee. There's a club in right outside of Cincinnati called Bobby Mackey's, and I performed there. There's a club in Phoenix, or actually Scottsdale, Arizona, called Handlebar Jays, and the owner of the club is Lyle Lovett's lead guitar player. His name is Ray Herndon, and he owns the club. And every time I go out there, he gets me up to sing with his band. And I mean, and it's unique because you play with these people a couple of times and they know all your stuff. And then, of course, the Nashville Palace in Nashville, Tennessee, John Hobbs owned that. John Hobbs opened the Nashville Palace, and his dishwasher was Randy Travis.
Wow.
His first two waitresses he hired were Laurie Morgan and Tanya Tucker. So when they get done with their shift, they go up and sit in with the band. And the Palace was right across the street from the Opryland Hotel. And in the wintertime, they used to run the Grand Ole Opry out of the hotel over there. And the country music artists would perform at the Opry and then go across the street and sit in with with the band at the Palace, and you'd see anybody. You'd see Waylon Jennings or George Jones, or you could see almost anybody that played the Opry would come across the street to the Palace when it was over, because that's where they'd get to relax and sit down and have a good time. So I was good friends with the people at the Palace, and I still, when I go up there in the winter, I still sing at the Palace on New Year's Eve, and we have a good time. I got real good friends with the Oak Ridge Boys, and they're actually performing at the Opryland Hotel all of December for their Christmas shows and stuff. So I don't know if I told you this, but when I broke the record in Chicago for most games worked, the Oak Ridge Boys called the White Sox and asked if they could sing the national anthem.
Wow.
Wow, what a nice, wow, that's terrific.
That's fantastic.
That's great. That's really class. I got to ask you a question as a saloon owner, Joe. I'm just curious. Hey, Billy, save that question for the next time we got Joe on, because we got Faith Ford coming up. Oh. And Faith Ford is a terrific actress, and I really want to spend some time with her as well. So thanks for your segment today, Joe. And we'll see you again soon. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Okay.
And let's also give a shout out to our 3 books. If these lips could talk, Lamar's Gamble, and Combustible, all 3 are available right now via our website or Amazon.com. So rush out to get all 3, because who was it said, when your friend writes a book, you buy it? You buy it. Wasn't that was nice? Tommy Moore said that. Moore said that. That was very nice. When your friends write a book, you buy it. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. And that was a really nice thing that Tommy wrote. So, Derek, can we bring on my good friend, Faith Ford?
Let's do it.
Hey, Faith.
Hey.
How are you?
Great. How are you?
Good. That's my partner, Billy, and that's my other partner, Derek.
Hello.
Hi, Billy. Where's Derek?
Derek's in the ether because we can't see him on camera this week because I didn't.
Well, hello, Derek in the ether.
Derek's unsightly. We don't bring him on too often. Pleasure to know you, Faith. Yeah. A real pleasure. Thanks for doing the show.
Thank you.
Delighted that you're here.
What part of New York are you from, by the way?
I'm from the Bronx. And I noticed that when you were like 17, you went to New York. And that's a gutsy move coming from Alexandria, Louisiana.
I tell you. I don't even know what I was thinking. It was not exactly smart, but my parents sent me there and they stayed there with me for 2 weeks, and I had an agency and all that kind of stuff to go into modeling, of course. He got me into the Weiss Barron School of, trying to be an actor. At 17 years old. At 17. Yeah.
And were you living in Manhattan then? When you moved there to New York?
Right there in 42nd and 2nd, Hotel Theater. Mm-hmm.
Well, that is a gutsy move, huh?
Yeah. I knew absolutely no one.
Yeah, and you were quite the innocent, I would believe, also because. No.
Yeah, well, let me just say, my hair was longer than it is now, and it was extremely curly, naturally curly, and I don't know. I was like a babe in the woods. It was blonde and blowing bubble gum and everything. It was just. I don't know why I didn't just disappear.
Because you had talent and perseverance. That's why you didn't.
Well, I didn't. I wouldn't have. I think I stood out that way because I still had a little bit of my Southern accent. I was advised by Weiss Barron to lose it, so I had to go study with Mae Monroe. She was a dialect coach, and she. Wow. Yeah.
I think it's charming, the Southern accent. They wanted you to lose it. And let me, Alexandria, Louisiana, had you made a couple of excursions to New Orleans or not?
I was in what was called the National Forensics League, and my sister got me into acting, actually. When I was a freshman, I got into we competed all over the state at high schools, mostly public high schools, some Catholic high schools, everything. And I did humorous interpretation, dramatic interpretation, prose, poetry, duet acting. And I sometimes competed in 3 or 4 categories. I had a mind like a steel trap. I never forgot anything. So she was giving me stuff like, my sister used to find my pieces for me, like Thurber Carnival and, effective gamma rays on Man and Moon marigolds. I didn't know what I was doing, really, because my previous experience acting was being a cheerleader, which was my biggest acting job, because I was probably the most shy, wallflower, quiet, skinny. And if I told you skinny, it's not. It literally. They used to call me lizard legs. I was literally like this. That was my knobbly knees. I was just tiny little thing. I didn't eat very much because I didn't like very much. I only liked field peas and grandma's cornbread. I was like, and then finally my daddy just found out that when my mom would fry pork chops, I used to like all the crispy stuff, like the fat part. So, you've heard of Jack Sprat, could eat no fat, his wife could eat no lean. I decided I would be like his wife and I would try to gain weight by eating the fat, So that sounds funny, but it's weird. But.
So you were in New York for a while,
mm-hmm.
and you did a couple of soaps, and then you moved out to California.
Mm-hmm.
What was the experience like when you met Diane and Candace for the first time auditioning for Murphy Brown?
Oh my gosh, I was literally, it was a monsoon basically in the Valley, Burbank Studios, when I had I think it was my 4th or 5th callback, and it was to meet Candace, and I thought, I went and bought a silk suit, an Ellen Tracy silk suit on my credit card. And I thought, I hope I get this part because I really can't afford this suit. But I wanted to have really nice shoes. I got a new pair of shoes, a pair of Nina pumps. And I just thought I looked special. And as I got out of my Turismo, which was my car, a Plymouth Turismo, and was walking across, I think it was Magnolia Boulevard or something. Not Magnolia, it was Olive, where it swings there.
Right.
And where the offices were that corner, bungalow, they took up that whole. And I remember I was going in there and they had Candace ready. And all of a sudden, it was as if we had these kind of rains in Louisiana, but I had never had them in California, but the sky fell out. And all of a sudden, it was like a river. There was a river running, down all of it. I was like, I don't know what else to do. So I did the whole Louisiana thing. I just walked right through it. I was like, I'm not afraid of rain. But by the time I got into the audition, my silk suit was blue, but it turned this dark. It was this pretty like blue, like this blue, this like royal blue and everything. It turned this blue. It was like dark.
Right.
And it was just at the top. And my hair was wavy. Remember I told you that I had and it just became, I was like rat hair just hanging down. I was like, I've got to do something. And I found this bowette that I was using, and I found it in my purse, and I put my hair back in this bow to try to help it. And I just walked in, and the first thing I said, and my shoes were actually making a sound from the in them. It was like,
oh.
And I walked in, and Candace looked gorgeous, naturally gorgeous. Her hair, just swept, and her nice horn-rimmed glasses, and just everything that you can imagine Candace being in those C ads. And it was the most horrible first impression I could have ever made. I walked in and I just didn't know what to say. I said, "Oh my gosh, you're so beautiful." I said, I'm so sorry. I got caught in the rain outside. But I just used it, and that actually, she started laughing immediately. And I think possibly you would have to ask her what she thought of me. But maybe it made it just. I had no attitude. I had zero. It humbled me completely.
Yeah, but knowing Candace as we both do,
yes,
that was probably attractive to her. You were just very down to earth, and she's very down to earth, and it probably put you in a good light for sure.
Well, it became the earth connection from that point forward. I mean, I could, you have these ideas that you're going to be cool and you're going to come in and present and all of that. No, it's much better with comedy to just be real and go with whatever you have at the moment. And that just completely disarmed me. I had zero, I just sort of expectations went by, and I just was there, real in the moment. We did our reading, and I said, it's up to the the big man upstairs is what happens at this point. But evidently it went well, and I went back quite a few more times. Back in the day, we used to audition probably 7 to 10 times sometimes,
Right.
depending on whether or not it was single camera or whatever, screen test. And I loved that whole process because every time I went in, I would get more notes and more funny things to do and interesting things to do. They don't really do that anymore. You're kind of like sending it off into the ether.
Yeah, it's amazing, especially with COVID. You just put yourself on tape and send it off, and like you said, into the ether, and and wait to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer things like this where you get to actually talk to the director, because one of the things I think I function best on is taking notes quickly. And I like to make adjustments, and I found that's a challenge ever since I've, acting class and, doing those speech tournaments in high school and everything. I love to listen and make adjustments.
Well, the rain obviously was a confidence shatterer, and I have to walk in with that. But you really honed your chops in New York on the soap operas, right? With One Life to Live in Another World, no?
Oh yeah. Well, that taught me my chops. I think I thought I had something coming from all the things that I did in high school, and doing them sitting there by myself in a room with judges, but it was nothing like what I had to do on the soap opera. I remember my first day, I was the replacement of a replacement for Kira Sedgwick to play Julia Shearer. And they loved Kira. I mean, the audience loved her. The people on the show loved her. Chris Rich was on the show at the time. Morgan Freeman was on the show at the time. I mean, and I stepped into the shoes of someone who it didn't go so well for, bless her. And I think they thought I was a California girl. And and it was kind of one of those things. Ira Serker was my director. And I remember my entrance as I first came in. When you replace someone on a series, I made my entrance. You have a long entrance where they can say, the role of Julia Shearer will now be played by Faith Ford. And they finished as I hit the bottom of the stairs and opened the door. Well, when I hit the bottom of the stairs, the rug was not glued down, and it went, and I literally fell flat. Talk about, again, the entrance, flat on my arse. And that's when I realized I'm just going to have fun with it. And I have a sense of, if I think I do comedy because I'm not cool. And every time I've tried to be cool, those kind of things happen. I thought, I've got this, I'm going to come in, I'm going to step into this role, I can do this, and that's what happened. So it just leveled me. I met great relationships, had great friends on that show, and to this day, I think Morgan's, still remembers me, which is it's a good thing. Joe Morton too.
Joe Morton. So getting back to Murphy, when did you know that you got the part? Who told you? Did Diane call you, or did your agent call you?
Well, here's the thing. I had auditioned quite a few times, and I was up for, at the time, I was lucky enough to have been up for coming back to 30-something I'd been recurring on 30-something, and they were going to make me a regular role if I were to come back. So I had that, and then I had Wonder Years that I had screen tested for, and then Murphy Brown. Well, all my people, of course, wanted me to do Murphy Brown, and I was sort of nervous, and I said, well, I've got to talk to Diane, because I just have to make sure that, because I looked at acting, I'm probably rare, that it had to be kind of like a teacher's job or a banker's job. I had to go with the one that was going to pay my mortgage or my bills. I didn't have a mortgage. And I thought, which one is going to be kind of like the bird in the hand? And what seemed like the bird in the hand was to just go back and do the easy thing of 30-something. And it wasn't easy, and work with them again. But Diane, I had to talk to her, because I needed to sort of hear if she really liked me, or if she really thought she was where we were going to go with the character, or if I was just going to be one season and done, and I can remember calling her, and she said, I said, I just want to see that she's not just the joke and I want her to grow.
Yes, because the role was of a former Miss America.
And this is
Yes!
Diane English.
This is Diane English, and the role was of a former Miss America who is brought on the show for ostensibly her looks.
Well, she had replaced Murphy. She was the deal was she had filled in for Murphy Brown while she was gone.
Right.
She was like the woman, and then obviously not qualified, never done any, nothing. She coordinated closets. That was her talent. I mean, that I consider as a skill because I can coordinate closets. But I mean, it's not exactly a Miss America skill, And I thought, there's just no way. I said that Murphy didn't like her. She didn't really want her to be there. So I thought, is Murphy going to get her way one day?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Is she going to be gone? And she assured me, no, that was not going to happen. I said, well, the only thing I think that could happen is that she's got to get some hard knocks lessons, because sometimes we learn when we don't even think we're learning. And she said, absolutely. And I think that's how Corky's going to have to learn, is on her feet, that made it for me.
Yeah. So, and then you got the part, and
Mm-hmm.
and Diane told you herself that you would get it.
We talked on the phone. I remember my agent brought me into his office. It was in the evening, and I remember it was getting dark outside. J. Michael Bloom, and he brought me into his office. He said, "No, I've set up a conference call, and I want you to, sit here." And I literally talked to her from my agent's office, and it was lovely. But it was also very scary because at that time, that would have been my first, other than I'd had a couple of opportunities. I'd had 13 on the Air with Barry Kemp on Popcorn Kid, and then auditioned for My Sister Sam, and that's how Diane knew me. But I really, really, really wanted that thing of being in a series, but being in comedy, especially because Meg Lieberman at the time, who had seen me quite a few times for different things, Facts of Life and stuff like that. I remember she specifically said to me, you just don't get the comedy thing. I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, comic timing. You just don't have any comic timing. I said, oh. So that became my mission at that point.
To get comic timing.
Yeah. And so that's why it was important for me to try to do comedy, because I felt like as you get older, you get wrinkled up, you get older, and that's all good. And I love wrinkles. I mean, and my grandma loved their wrinkles. And I think that's wisdom. And so I said, if you're funny, people, if you get laugh lines, that's from laughing and smiling. And these lines you get a lot from smiling. So I thought, as I get older, I want to keep making people smile if that's possible.
Well, you started making people smile in the pilot of Murphy Brown. And I'll never forget the line that cemented your comedy with me forever. You were talking to Grant Schad, who was played Miles Silverberg, and you said, Miles, what's this word? How do you pronounce this word? And,
how do you pronounce this word?
And the word was? The word was? Shiite. And then you said,
that could have been real embarrassing.
That was the word that cemented your comedy for me.
Oh, I loved that little girl. I look back at it now. I never really watch myself right away. I sort of look at it, but I kind of squint, and I'm critical. I'm a Virgo. I can always find flaws. And so I look back on it now, and I said, well, I look at it and go, bless her little heart.
She was so sweet and so adorable, and she got 5 Emmy nominations to boot. You're just so terrific in that. Why don't you walk us through the cast?
Thank you.
Why don't you walk us through the cast?
Which starting with
Eldon.
Oh, Robert Pastorelli, probably the most interesting. He's one of those people that when I was a child, when my dad and I used to sit in the mall and look at people and study people. That was my early acting times. Did y'all go away? Okay, no, you didn't. Oh, look, you're just showing pictures of us.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I used to look at him. I would watch him every time I had scene with him, or he was in the read through of the table. I just always looked at him to see what he was going to do next.
And that's Robert. That's Robert with the mustache and the beard.
Yeah. And he just was the most interesting character. And the guys, like I changed in the women's dressing, like wardrobe room. It was a tiny little closet, right, Frank?
Yep.
It was tiny. It was like so small, not glamorous. But that's where I would change in between scenes. And all the guys would cram into the guys' dressing room. And Bobby would be in there telling jokes that I could never repeat. But they would be laughing so hard. And so I would open the door a crack and I'd go, that's not fair. Y'all need to let me here. Y'all are having too much fun in there. But you know what? I remember one time I picked him up because I lived in West Hollywood and he didn't have a car yet. He was sort of just fresh out of New York. It was right at the beginning. And I said, well, I'm close, but where do you live? He said, Crescent Heights. I said, oh, well, I'll just pick you up later over the hill, over Laurel Canyon, and I'll pick you up. So sure. I stopped by to pick him up, and it was hilarious. He had overslept or something. I thought I said I had the right place. I went, he buzzed me in. He said, oh, just a minute. And he let me in. But it was like, I would expect nothing else from Bobby. And I have to tell you, he was beloved by many, and I loved working with him. And I always wondered what it would have been like had Corky and Eldon ever really gotten together. What a match that would have been.
It would have been wild. And of course, Bobby tragically passed away about 10, 15 years ago.
And Eldon was Bobby's character.
Yes, Eldon was Bobby's character. Yeah. So how about Joe Regalbuto?
Oh, well, Joe and I are Virgo, like brother and sister. I mean, we love to cook together. We talk. Yeah, he's an amazing guy.
And that's Joe right there between you and Candace.
Joey Patafuco.
We had Joe on the show. He was a great guest. Really interesting guy.
Joey actually taught me how to make pesto. He's the best pesto man.
Wow.
And you remember from the pilot, and maybe the first episode after the pilot, Joe had a rug. He always wore a rug.
I never understood that. I love his head. He has a great head.
Yeah, but he was always wearing a rug on the show.
Yep.
But not. There's two
in
shows.
real life.
Yeah, in real life, no. He's like Alan. Yeah. He was like Alan Brady. Alan Brady, when he was doing the Alan Brady show, never wore a rug. But when they were on the air, he wore the rug. So when we were doing the show, he was always without the rug. But as soon as FYI went on the air, he put the rug on. That lasted about 2 episodes, as did the close the door joke.
Close the door. When did they stop doing that? I thought they did that for a while. They didn't?
Oh, it's first season.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just because every time everybody came in, everybody would yell, close the door, because everybody would be blinded by the light. And if like 15 people would be coming in.
So this was on the show. They were doing the callback.
Yeah.
Constant callback.
Constant callback. And it became the close the door show instead of Murphy Brown.
And it always had to be coordinated too.
Yep. Yeah. So Joe's a good guy.
Joey's the best, and he's also an excellent director.
Yes.
Excellent director.
He directed about 55 episodes of George Lopez. So it was me, him, George, and we told a story, but we used to play golf at Riviera. And one time George was in the pro shop. And
love George.
And George bought a lot of stuff on Joe's credit card because Joe's the cheapest man in America.
Notoriously cheap.
Joe's got the first dollar that he ever earned, but he's a great guy. What about Charles Kimbrough?
Oh my goodness! Well, Charlie was like such the consummate professional.
Which one's Charles now?
Charlie is over Candace.
Jim Dial.
Oh, I got him. Okay.
Yeah, that's him. He is, first off, an amazing singer, Broadway actor. Wow. So privileged to have him. Also with the best show business stories ever that I will take to my grave. But the thing about Charlie is he always said to me, he gave me great allergy advice. He said, now, Faithy, you have allergies. And he said, when you get older like me, you're going to have real problems with those allergies. So always keep a good allergist on hand. And he was so right. It's been like the thing. Like I have like allergies behind this eye. This is where it gets me. The left eye, as Gary Marshall used to say. But anyway, Charlie was always the guy who said, I don't ever want to go, like lose it, like laugh. He said, because if I ever lose it, it's over. And you know what? One time he did lose it and he couldn't stop laughing. And it was crazy. We were just laughing at Charlie. I was like, look at that. Candace was like, well, look at that. Charlie went. He really did go, you know?
I sort of remember that episode when Charlie went, because he played the singularly straight-laced newsman.
Yes.
He said, good evening.
Right.
ladies.
I know his voice, but his face, yeah.
And a great voiceover actor he was. But, you know, they took that off of real life, I think, because he actually did lose it when we were shooting. And he said, he just hated it. He didn't ever want to hate it. And he was always the first one off book. Always.
That means off script. That means
off book. Gotcha.
Off book means you know your lines.
Yeah.
First person memorized. And I had to start working on mine because, Frank, if you'll remember, I would say nothing or I would have a page.
Right.
Of just talking. And I can remember, and it was always the big finished joke. So it would be I call it like getting on the train and you can't jump off. So I would just start burying it in, but God forbid it would change something in the middle of that. It was like a machine. So, but I'd start working on that because I had to get those down because I couldn't breathe, and Diane would say, the thing is, if you breathe, if you drop for 1 second, even take a breath, so I had to try to be fast, with all of mine. So, but Charlie was one of those who knew he had a lot to do. And most of his was, like, we called it laying cable. It was story or the serious stuff and things like that. So he would get that stuff down. Even his stuff when he was working on in the news, that was actually, we didn't have teleprompters.
Right.
So we would memorize all that stuff.
Let me ask both of you. Diane English, why was her comedic timing and her instinct so good with Murphy Brown? She really didn't have a background in that initially, did she?
I'll let Faith answer that.
Well, here's the thing. Well, I don't know if I'll give the right answer.
Well,
I'll try. I'll give it a try.
Okay.
Diane happens to be, I think Murphy Brown was someone she was her. So basically the Murphy Brown voice, it was like her and Corby. Between the two of them, they had
Corby Samus was another
Corby Siamis. And they were the ones who really just had her down. And there was it was just pretty much flawless, the whole entire time for the first 4 seasons. I mean, it was very little, most they would ever do was like lean it out a little bit because all the words, one thing that Diane always was sure of was the words on the show. And we always had a lot to say because it was driven by the written word. The characters were all made, and there was not any, back in the day, it was almost, we did it like a radio play. So the old time radio plays where you could, radio plays, you couldn't see the people, so you had to fill it all with words. Well, that's kind of the way Murphy Brown was. Do you hear the thunder? We got a thunderstorm going out there.
Do you? In Louisiana.
Yeah. But anyway.
So it was sort of semi-autobiographical, Murphy Brown. It was sort of.
It was.
Not really.
Not really. It was the characters, I think look, Diane and Candace would oftentimes show up in the same Donna Karan suit or something. Yeah. They were both Tauruses, which I do. There's a lot of comparisons.
And I think they had a symbiotic relationship.
Yes, they did. It was almost like they could finish each other's sentences, sort of thing. So meant to be kind of like sisters, very similar in personalities.
Yeah, and Diane's extremely bright.
Yeah, well, that was.
Oh my gosh, crazy bright.
Faith knows this, but she won the Emmy for the pilot episode of Murphy Brown. And she wrote it. It was written. The first draft was written before the actors went on strike, and she couldn't rewrite it during the strike. So we shot it during the strike. So Diane won the Emmy for her first draft.
That's remarkable.
Yes.
That's insane. That's insane.
it's kind of crazy that was all happening, and I can just remember thinking that gave us such comfort because that really made it like a play. And I remember what was also great about Diane on the writing part. She knew that script was right by Wednesday, and we shot that show on Friday, so we all knew that script was locked, and she was confident in that. We didn't have changes. She always, on show night, it was just about having fun, and it gave us the entire day of Thursday when we were camera blocking to really get that dialogue in, and she wanted us to have that, and it became so organic. And I thought after she left the show, it got into more of with a lot of the writers, a lot of comedy writers like to fix the jokes in front of the audience. And more so over the years, like when I got onto Norm and stuff like that, and then Hope and Faith. But back in the day, the wonderful thing about that was the writers and the executive producers on sitcoms, they got once that, the script was approved by the network on Wednesdays after we did the network run through and everything in the studio, they left the producers alone, and it was really wonderful. I don't know if it'll ever be like that again, but it was certainly the golden days.
For sure. Now that takes us to Grant Shaw.
Yes, Grantster.
Grant. and that's Grant.
Everybody. Yeah, and everybody thought Grant was Jewish, actually really Jewish, and he wasn't. He was a Catholic boy, an Irish Catholic boy.
And Grant was based sort of on Diane's former husband's character.
Yeah, Joel Tchaikovsky. Yeah, but also a lot of people compared him to Gelman.
Yes.
On the Regis show. I mean, Michael Gelman used to always say they think I'm, Miles Silverberg, because he was so young when he started with Regis. So there was that comparison made a lot. But Grant was like Grant and Jane Leaves, who played his girlfriend on the show.
And they were dating in real life, I believe.
Well, I fixed them up.
Oh.
I was sort of responsible for that because I saw Grant was, I thought Grant was her type, and it turned out he was. And I remember we were doing a big publicity shoot with this big photographer. It was in our first season, and I remember I asked Grant, I said, "What are you doing after we're done?" And he said, "Oh, I don't have any plans." And I said, "Come over to my place." And I just thought that they would like each other. And they did. They really did. And it was a funny pairing, the two of them. And she used to tease him and stuff. But they didn't.
And Jane Leaves played Frasier's. Daphne? Did she play Daphne?
Daphne Moon.
Oh, Daphne on Frasier.
The British.
Yes.
Yeah, she had the British accent.
Yes.
Did she really have a British accent?
Yes, she did.
Oh, yeah, she was my roommate. So, yes, I can do her.
I can do her.
I'm an actress. I can do her.
She was like, "Oh, Fatty." She calls me Fatty Fond. Fatty, But it's a long story. But in the end, Grant's almost like my brother-in-law that never happened, in a way. And he and my husband are still in touch, and my husband Campion, they're still friends. And I was just talking to him last week, actually. He lives in Pennsylvania. He's a good guy.
He is a good guy. I remember on the pilot, he was the last guy cast to play Miles. And
yeah, he came out with a suitcase.
And I don't know whether you remember Marty Nedboy or not, but Marty was our dialogue coach before on the pilot.
Oh, yes.
On the pilot, and Marty was responsible for picking him up and taking him out to get a couple of pair of underwear, some shorts, because he had nothing.
I think he just had his valise.
Yeah,
I don't even think he had clothes.
He didn't have toothpaste or anything, so Marty had to take him out to get him, and then we couldn't find him on show night.
Yeah.
I said, "Where's Grant?" And Marty goes, "Come here," because Marty had a thick Jewish accent, and I said, "Marty, where's Grant?" He said, "He's throwing up out in the bathroom." So I had to go out and get him because he was so nervous that he was throwing up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, you can see the great affection you have for these fellow actors. I guess 10 years.
Well, they're like
10 years of family.
We are family, and that's why coming back was so wonderful.
So did we forget anybody? Oh, Candace.
Oh.
Oh, she was on the show too. Yeah, that's
she was on the show too.
Can do. I call her Can Do because Can Do can just pretty much do anything she puts her mind to. You know, she's unbelievable. She,
Yeah.
I have to say that you know, it starts at the top.
Yep.
And what an amazing journey it was to have her at the top of the heap. She was queen. You know, when they talk about these days, queen, you know, wonderful women, queen. She truly was. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, she was like royalty. I mean, her experience in the business. But what to me makes her more like that is her not taking herself too seriously in the mix. I mean, to have been raised in Hollywood in the golden days, as it were, to have just such a, you know, she used to come over to my house and just get on the floor with my dogs, you know, and that's the way she was. I mean, and you know, if I said to her, I remember one year it was my birthday, and I said, my parents are in town. It was I said, we're just having dessert and stuff, but for my birthday, but you want to come over? Yes, I'll come over, Faithy. And you know, and she came over, and the first thing she did was she laid in the floor with my dingoes, you know, and just gave them love. And that to me is Candace in a nutshell. She loves animals. She loves her new grandson. And back then, it was all about Chloe. I can remember
Chloe's her daughter.
Chloe is her daughter, and she's now an amazing writer. She writes for Vogue and everything. She's unbelievably smart. Not that I'm surprised with that mother and that father. And she was raised so well, and she's such a lady. But I remember the first time
her father's Louis Mal, the director.
Yes.
Louis Mal, sure.
Who was Candace's first husband, and he passed away.
And for our audience that don't know, that Candace's father was Edgar Bergen, Charlie McCarthy,
and Candace's brother was a wooden dummy.
Yes. Well,
I'm going to tell you a story about that. So then I remember the first time I met Chloe, Candace had her sitting in her chair, and she had mouse ears on, like little Mickey Mouse ears, and she had a little Mickey on her thing. I think she had been to her first time to Disneyland or something. She was the cutest. She's just so adorable. Chloe was just a special, special child. And Candace, being the photographer that she was, had the most amazing pictures of her as well. But I guess the thing about Charlie McCarthy, I hadn't read her book, let's just say. And when I found out that she was Charlie McCarthy, you know, sister, as it were, I was obsessed with antiques and things like that. And one time I was in Hawaii on a trip in Hawaii, and I went to an antique store, and I found an antique chalk statue of Charlie McCarthy. And I decided, oh my gosh, I have to get this for Candace. Now, I didn't know really how she felt about Charlie McCarthy at the time, because I hadn't read the book. So I decided I was going to make a lamp out of it, that I was going to put in her trailer for her birthday. And I did. And I told Grant, I said, she liked the lamp. But she didn't keep it in her trailer. And I remember going to the house one time, and I couldn't find the lamp. I didn't ever know what happened to the lamp. And I asked Grant about it. I said, I wonder if she didn't really like the lamp. And he said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, it was a Charlie McCarthy statue. I made a lamp out of it. Was it the wrong? He said, what? She hates Charlie McCarthy. I said, really? And
I had no idea that she hated Charlie McCarthy. And Mortimer Snerd as well, I guess. He was
talk about a Corky move. I mean, you know. But who knows? I mean, it was just the thought. But that was my Charlie McCarthy story. But getting back to Candace, I mean, I try to, you know, touch base, and she really is like that older sister mentor for me in my life. And over the years, when I've had maybe challenges that I've had to consult her with on, things, I will call her and get her take on it. And she's always really centered and focused about it. And she she's always been so great to me, and she helps me confidence wise, you know, because it can get tough out there.
You know, she's such a great woman. When we wrote If These Lips Could Talk, Candace sort of gave me a dressing down because I didn't call her and ask her for a testimonial for the back. And I said, well, I didn't want to impose on our friendship like that. I mean, she's still Candace Bergen, and you know, I have such great respect for her that I don't want her to think that I want anything from her at any time.
But that's what she's like, right?
Yep.
I mean, I asked her to do the forward of my cookbook because I thought, you know, because she was used to always like the things I would make for her, which weren't even that difficult or anything, but she would always make big, you know, like my little pecan pies, and, you know, when I made red beans and rice one time for the crew and all that kind of stuff. She said, when I finally did my cookbook, I said, do you think you could, you know, just it doesn't have to be that long.
There it is.
That's it.
Cooking with Faith. Yep.
Yeah. And she said, absolutely. And she did the most lovely forward for me that I will actually never, ever forget.
Well, why don't you tell us about what some of the recipes are in the cookbook? And if is it still available on Amazon where we can pick it up?
It's still there. It's still there.
You had me with red beans and rice. You had me right off the bat with the red beans and rice.
It actually got great reviews. Back in the day, there weren't really very many people other than Patti LaBelle, celebrities or actresses, I should say, or you know, in the entertainment business that were doing cookbooks. So it was kind of novel at the time, and the only reason I did it was because I wanted to preserve my family recipes.
Wow,
interesting.
And I had also learned to adapt them to more healthier versions, or a lot of my friends were vegetarians. Joe is a vegetarian. Right. And so I would learn to make things when I would have get-togethers that were tasty and scrumptious and yum, Louisiana style stuff for those people. And now it's gone even further, vegan. But anyway, so one of the things I used to make was, I still make them. I do po' boys. I cook every day.
Po' boys. So
I make all sorts of beans. Like beans are a big thing in Louisiana. So like we'll do baby limas, and there's this company called Camellia Dry Beans. And so through the pandemic, it's like when someone makes beans, we share with my neighbors. It's like, I made beans, y'all come bring a container and get them. You know? Or gumbo.
Some of these recipes are actually your grandmother's recipes. Is that correct?
Yes. My grandma's coconut cake is stellar, I must say. And Melissa Clark was she co-wrote it with me, and so she went through, and she's, you know, New York Times. If you look her up, she's very well known, and she does her own recipes. But she helped test all the recipes for me to make sure that people with normal stoves could cook them in ovens. I said, well, that's all I have is normal. It's just, I'm not a fancy girl. If it's not easy, I'm not going to have it. So, but one of the things that
Billy knew a lot of women like that.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of cooking myself. You know, with Italian grandmothers, interestingly enough, you know, when they pass on the recipes, everybody always says, it's great, but it's not quite like grandma's. Well, grandma usually leaves out one thing in the episode, in the recipe, just so it's never quite like grandma's.
One of the stories I talk about in my book, I think, is my grandma my grandpa was a farmer and a preacher, and my mom's father. And both of my grandfathers were big gardeners, and we're talking gardening for food. And so every summer was just the bountiful harvest, and you would put things up for the winter. When we talk about putting them up, you'd freeze them, or you'd jar them and can them. Mm-hmm. And so they'd do fields of, my favorite peas were purple hull, pink-eyed purple hull peas. And if Mama couldn't get me to eat anything else, she could make those, and I'd be happy. But we grew them, and we learned to shell peas when we learned to speak, basically. We'd be sitting there with this big tub of peas, and I remember my grandma Cora saying, well, Faithy, if you're going to eat peas, you've got to learn to shell them.
Yeah.
I said, all right. And I'd sit next to my girl. She put me this big wash tub, full of peas already. And I just sit there with with them in between my legs. And I just sit there shelling peas. And what it is, the purple hull of the pea would stain your hands purple. So it would take days for that purple stain to wear off. But that's what we did. And Grandma didn't believe in they started coming out with fancy pea shellers.
Nope. It's got to be by hand.
Nope, because you'd waste a pea. You'd always waste 1 or 2 peas. And I got into the spirit of that because I didn't want to waste a pea either. And years later, I have a friend that is from Texas, and he said to me, you know what I found out? Because he's a vegan. One of the highest sources of protein is pink eye purple whole peas. And I said, hello.
I see Derek smiling. Derek grew up in Mississippi, so he might have had a few pea pickers.
Oh well, it is something that is a treasured thing. I mean, you can actually, they're starting to sell them in stores. I think they're doing them in Texas. But if I could ever do something when I get old, it would be to have fields of those and market them. And
Tennessee Ernie Ford, bless your little pea picking heart.
Pea picking heart, yeah.
I went to Louisiana for 2 weeks, to New Orleans for 2 weeks when I got back from Vietnam in '71. I ended up staying 2.5 years. And I went out with a girl for 3 months just because she knew how to shuck crawfish. Wow. She could shuck them so fast. We didn't get along that good, but boy, could she shuck crawfish.
Yeah.
But I love that town. I love the food. So I'm going to look into this cookbook of yours because I love Louisiana cooking. I just love it. There's nothing like it in the world.
So, I learned how to do my gumbo from Paul Prudhomme.
Wow.
And I understand from my friend Eddie Herbert, who was born and raised in Louisiana as a great chef, that the secret to gumbo is in the roux.
That's right.
Gotta have the roux.
Well, it's everybody's secret. It's like when they're saying it's everybody's gumbo tastes different. And the secret is how they do their roux.
Yep.
And some people do it real dark. Some people do it medium. Some do it light. It doesn't really matter. The roux is basically the gravy that starts, is the base.
Well, we better continue with this interview because we're going to be here forever.
Talking about food, especially.
So Murphy Brown goes off after 10 years, 63 Emmys, the most decorated show in television history. Wow. And then you did Norm, is that right?
Yeah, I did Norm. I did Norm. I really did.
And why don't you tell us a little about Norm, who passed away recently?
Well, I loved doing that show.
There he is.
I didn't even know. Look at me with my cat. Oh,
and he's got a fire department helmet on.
Billy
I'm a big fan of Norm because I'm a half-assed comedian myself. And Norm, I've never heard a bad word about Norm Macdonald from any comic ever.
No, he was a generous comic. In fact, he was always trying to get me to flow in the. I talked about it. I did a post on Instagram, and I talked about that. He was trying to get me to get into that because after doing Murphy Brown, everything was just the written word, A-N and that was and Norm just wanted to get me into the flow of improv, coming off of Saturday Night Live and doing stand up. And I really tried to do my best, but for the most part, it was either going to be all improv for me or it was going to be the written word, kind of. But I can just remember Norm would just whisper things in my ear just before we were about to do a scene. And it was just, and action. And I would be sitting there and my head would just be going, and I never knew if it was true or if it was just something that he made up to sort of see me squirm. But quite frankly, it was wonderful doing that show. I got to work with Laurie Metcalf and Ian Gomez.
Artie Lang too, right?
Artie Lang. And it was just such a great experience for me to be able to work. I'd gone from doing Murphy Brown with Candace at the helm and heavy on the dialogue to just, it was more of like a romp and an ensemble of fun, and loose.
And that was a Bruce Helford show, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah. It was. And Bruce was fantastic too.
Yeah, because Bruce and I worked together on a variety of things. But Billy, you sort of had an experience with Norm Billy was an illegal bookmaker in New York.
Back in the day, I was a bookmaker for about 7 years because I was a compulsive character. I was a compulsive drinker, gambler, womanizer. The only thing I couldn't resist was temptation, pretty much. But Norm, used to bet with me years ago. I'd never met Norm, but he was a compulsive. Well, at the time he was a compulsive gambler. He always sports. And Artie Lang, of course, I read his documentary, his biography. I'm sorry, and he was a compulsive character, well documented with drugs and everything else. And he had a tough life, but a great comic, just a great comic. So you were working with two compulsive characters and two.
I know. Well, I didn't know how far to take that, but yes, that's definitely a factor. But I'm a good one to work with those kinds.
Yes, because you're a steadying force.
It's like my first husband was right in there in that world of being able to adjust and be there with a lot of the. I was familiar. I'm just going to say, didn't know it going in, but I became familiar with it so that when I met Norm, I had his number, so I had experience.
There's a great line in Artie Lang's biography where he's walking into a Rolling Stone concert. And of course, when you're doing drugs, and I know from personal use or drinking, you always want to smoke a cigarette. You want something in your mouth all the time. And he's going into a Rolling Stone concert in Madison Square Garden, and he wants to light a cigarette. And the usher says, "No, there's no smoking in Madison Square Garden." And Artie Lang looks at the usher. He goes, "I'll bet you $500 when I walk through this runway that Keith Richards has a cigarette in his mouth." He says, "Don't tell me there's no smoking in it." But yeah, he was quite a character. So
yeah, and they were really good friends. And it's funny because I can't say the name, but I had a name, like a full name that Norm gave me.
Yeah,
and it wasn't just.
You can say it. You can say it if your ladylike will allow it. You could say it on this form.
It was frickin' Faith Ford. it wasn't frickin'. It was
the alliteration.
And it would be like frickin' Faith Ford. And sometimes he would call me and it would say, "Fuck. Fucking Faith Ford." And I go, "Hi, Norm," and it would just be that way. And I, from yelling from across the lot, "Fucking Faith Ford!" And then one time Kelly was going to be doing Saturday Night Live, and
Kelly Ripa,
Kelly Ripa,
which was the next show.
Yeah,
followed Norm.
So Kelly is like my sister, and in real life as well. And I said, "Now if you meet Norm, she said, "He's going to be doing the show with me." And I said, "Really?" And I said, "Well, he might use profanity when he sees you, if he says my name. If he correlates you and me." And she said, and so then she immediately called me and she said, "Oh my gosh, Faith, you're right. From down the hall at Saturday Night Live, I'm in Lorne Michaels' office. He just literally says, he comes down the hall, fucking Faith Ford!" And so anyway, it was just his thing. And I think he found it funny that I don't know what I just rolled with it. I never was a prude about it. I just thought it was funny.
Yeah. But I'm sure he meant it that way too, just being funny. And I thought it was interesting when you were talking about the written word. You're used to doing comedy like that, where, of course, Norm is more improv, like he just flows with things. And that is tough if you're not used to it. That's really tough.
Well, the one time he called me out in front of the audience, and someone actually, when I talked about it on Instagram, someone said, "I was there. I saw that." But one time he would change his dialogue, and he would change it to where I would always pray that it was some sort of remotely, because he was so sharp.
Remotely connected to the script.
And so smart that he could just change just like that at the drop of the hat, just to get the laugh. So if he thought he was losing the audience, as a stand-up, as you do, you can shift and roll. And I remembered, I said, "Oh gosh, they're going, oh no, he's going off. Okay, well, let's just hope what I've got written will match, because I don't have a reply." And so I'm just looking at him, and after it was over, I just looked at him for a second, beat. And then I said my dialogue as written. And then he said, you see, everyone, she wasn't listening. She wasn't listening. and I said, nope. I turned out to the audience and said, nope, that's not true. I was listening, but he did not say his dialogue. He changed, and I didn't know how to reply. And I replied with the written word. So there. And that was the way it went.
So a variety of shows, television appearances and movie appearances followed your Hope and Faith. That brings us to 2018 and a revival of Murphy Brown.
Right.
What was that like for you?
Well, first off, we were crying, right? The first day, we couldn't all stop crying because the sets were recreated perfectly, except for the FYI set, which was not FYI, it was Murphy in the Morning. But other than that, Bill's bar was identical. And when I rounded the corner to see to go to the table read, and I saw Murphy's townhouse, I just started to and it was just the sentimental part of it that, who would have thought we'd have been back again? And it was such a privilege to have gotten that opportunity.
Yeah, it sure was terrific to be able to put the gang back together after, for me, 30 years from having done the pilot,
Wow.
From you, 20 years from having done the last episode. It was a real thrill for me, and it'll always be, I don't know about for you, but it'll always be the highlight of my career. Not the original Murphy Brown, but just the additional 13 episodes that we had a chance to all get together and do it again.
Right, and what you did with the sets, and you shepherded that all through, which was, he should be lauded for that. And you had that camera that was.
Oh, put the camera on the. We did a time lapse photography. Of building the set. And it took like 2 minutes or so, or a minute 20 seconds, and we put it to music, and it went from an empty set to a full stage on the first night. It was pretty good.
Wow! So you did a rapid thing of showing how you constructed the set. Wow, that's cool.
And I'll make a note. It says like 12:31 or something. I'll see maybe if we can find that and insert that into the show, into the edited version of the show.
I find it interesting
because that was your idea, wasn't it?
It was my idea.
I find it interesting that Frank said that the Redux was more important to him than the actual 10-year run you guys had originally. Did you feel the same way, Faith? Did you feel like the reunion was...
Yes, because, we had lost a couple of cast members.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was truly a treasured reunion with Diane, because Diane had left the show after season 4. So to have her back, and I thought, I'm going to just take in this entire moment. And shows are never done, especially multicam shows, are never done in New York, which is something I never understand, because it's the perfect audience for it, because they're like, the Broadway shows. And they are. I told Candace, I said, you watch, New York audiences are the best audiences. And they were the best audiences. They don't, like in LA, you would have to feed them, in order for them to really be there 100%, because they had so many shows that were multicam shows.
Yeah.
So they didn't.
In New York, everybody was seeing a situation comedy basically for the first time. So,
that's right.
And anybody who was coming to our show was privileged, because they were getting to see Candace, Faith, Joe, Grant, Tyne Daly, Nick Dodani, who's now starring in Evan Hansen.
Oh my gosh, which I'm so happy. I didn't even know he could sing.
Yeah, well, he can sing. He's quite a guy. Jake McDormand. We had a terrific cast, and they were treated to guest stars like Bette Midler, John Larroquette.
Yes.
When you came to our show, you never knew what you were going to get.
Hillary Clinton you had on the show.
Oh, I forgot. Hillary Clinton.
That girl.
That girl.
We had Brooke Shields on the show. She came and did the show.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, Merle Dandridge. Merle Dandridge is just gotten off the HBO show with Kaylee Cuoco.
Yeah, flight attendant. Flight attendant.
Yeah, she got nominated, I think.
And she was in a play on Broadway that I had seen before she came to do the show. I saw it like a week or two before she came to do our show.
Once Upon an Island?
Yes, Once Upon an Island.
Yeah.
Let me ask you both, is it the reason you had such great guest stars was because the show was such a success? Was it because of Candace's clout or Diane English's clout?
I think all of the above, because
Yeah.
it went back to the original show, because the original show had guest secretaries every week because Candace couldn't keep a secretary.
That's right.
And Candace, so every week, John F. Kennedy Jr. would come in, Liz Taylor would come in.
Wow.
They would come in and they would play secretaries. And then at the end of the show, they would get fired. And
Yes.
so I think Hillary Clinton came in to interview for the 98th secretary or something by the time the episode was, the first episode premiered. And it was like the 249th episode of Murphy Brown.
Crazy.
20 years apart. So it was a crazy.
I'm just looking forward to it eventually one day, figuring that music thing out so we can be streaming or something.
Yeah, the music thing is really expensive. Because
Yeah, I don't even understand. Why can't they just clip it off?
well, because you go back and watch some of the show, you know, the Devil with the Blue Dress was the theme song on the second episode, and it was all, you know, Aretha Franklin singing was, you know, that
We're
was,
talking about syndication here, is that right?
yes.
Yeah, it hurt us in syndication. That's why you can't see us anywhere.
Well, because it was cleared for all uses, domestically and worldwide, but that's those days that didn't count streaming, cable, etc. So to use it for streaming, cable, etc., it would be millions and millions of dollars. So
Too bad we couldn't get a one-time usage.
I agree that we did on 2018 with the Mick Jagger song for the opening of the. But of course, Diane has got a personal relationship with Mick, so that helped that along as well.
Yeah, that helped.
Yeah, that helped. Well, what else we want to ask?
I want to ask you about the vice president controversy. With how many people did you say watched that show, Murphy Brown, with the
what,
Quail?
70 million or so?
70 million people. That's astonishing.
It was astonishing. I remember them calling me and saying that you know, it's what happened, and I was like, what? He was like, do you want a quote? I was like, no quote for me. I have nothing to add on that. I mean,
well,
like, what could you say?
just to give our audience a little background, Candace got pregnant. Murphy got pregnant out of wedlock.
Right.
And Dan Quayle was the vice president at that time, and he said some nonsense about Murphy Brown is embracing
Wonton relationships. Yeah.
A single parent.
Yeah.
And
he didn't think that a single parent was a proper lifestyle choice.
Right.
Yes.
You know, for a woman being a single parent, as if it was a choice. It was an accident.
As if it was a choice.
The baby. I mean, it's like it was. I mean, it's just the part of me that thought it was odd at the time is that he would have been one of the ones who was, you know, obviously pro-life, which, and then obviously all of that, but yet she was choosing to keep the baby, so you should be happy. She's not like, you know, having an abortion or anything like that. So I just always thought that was an odd thing for him to even, but it helped us, so I'm grateful. You know, the show went like through the roof after that. You know,
70
like,
million.
70 million people.
Number one with a bullet, as Howard Stringer said.
Yeah, and you know, Murphy Brown was the number one show. I mean, that's an incredible figure to me. I mean, it just
it's mind-boggling. It's incredible.
Well, after that, that whole fifth season was ridiculous. I mean, it was really crazy in a good way, ridiculous.
And you
So-
won American Comedy Award for the funniest supporting actor, Golden Globe Award, Primetime Emmy 5 times, actress in a comedy series, Screen Actors Guild. You got
Not bad.
a lot of accolades.
Nominations. I just that to me, nominations, when they say those are really the wins. The reason I say it's a win is because your peers nominate you.
Right.
You have there's a panel that picks the winner, and but your peers nominate you, and they usually nominate you for your body of work.
Right.
And I always felt like that was great. What was interesting, people, I pulled myself out of the running. And I never really share this because it didn't just drop off. I probably would have continued to be nominated based on just the track record, as it were. But I think Candace had won 5 times. I think she got nominated and then won 5.
Yeah, she won 5 times in a row and then took herself out of competition for evermore.
And then what I did was I followed suit because it was Candace and me, and we always both thought, why aren't the guys getting these, award? I was right with her on that. And then I was usually the first category to be done. And as much as I loved hanging out with Julia Louis-Dreyfus and saying, oh yeah, no, we're losers again, because we kept losing, but well, you're not really losing, but
And that category was supporting actress in a comedy?
Supporting actress. But my category was just like, it was Julia, it was Laurie Metcalf or Roseanne, it was Rhea Perlman, and usually, I don't know, Jean, I don't remember all of them. They were great actresses. That's all I can say. So you don't lose when you're in the company of those kind of actresses. That's what I mean. But I think after Candace pulled out, I was like, if I end up getting nominated again, I'll be the only person there. And I just felt like I should back out too. And then, just say that's that. And so I did. And I followed suit with Candace. And I quite honestly, I never really missed that. I think that it was what it was. And it was kind of like,
Yeah. Cause, speaking for myself, I haven't been nominated 5 times, but I've been nominated a few times. And, after the first couple of times you don't win, there's no big deal into getting dressed up and going to hang out with the people you see at work every day. Never meant that much to me.
It becomes a whole day event, and all I can say is it's nice to watch it on TV as well.
Yeah, you sort of answered my question. I was going to ask Faith that it was the anxiety of being nominated comparable to the anxiety of getting the part. So it really wasn't that big a deal about.
No, I mean, it's very different to try to get a part because that's actually employment.
Yeah.
This is more like, it's like, it's good employment. It's really, there's nothing like being on a series. I must say that because, actors, we're gypsies, and it's kind of like we live out of our suitcases and we never know where we're going to be working next. So when you get something that is successful and is a hit where you can actually buy houses and, and have savings and all that kind of that's the true gift. So the awards, unfortunately or fortunately, really don't help that very much. Maybe you'll get some kind of great contract on your next move, but that always goes away. Really, it's really about your work that you keep putting out there.
I'll close this by just saying one of the other great things about the reunion in 2018 was not so much the show, but after the show, because we had a tavern right on the corner of the lot. It was called George's, and we had a great guy by the name of Foofy who ran the place, who ran the joint.
Was that his name?
Yeah, Foofy,
oh.
and the entire cast and crew and everybody, they closed the restaurant down for us, and we ate and drank till our heart's content. We stayed there all hours of the day and night, and it was just a great bonding experience and a great memory that I'll never forget.
Yes, it was like an extended family reunion. It lasted for, and then we had new people, new children, that's Jake and it was so great.
And everybody embraced it. Everybody was at George's from the moment we wrapped until wee hours of the morning. And it was just terrific.
Just keep the party going.
Yep.
Just keep it going.
Yep. Derek, do you have any closing questions for Faith? Billy?
No, just Faith, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real delight. I mean, a pleasure to know you and doing research on you, just how diversified you are. And I'd love to eat some of your red beans and rice, or some of that etouffee if you can do it.
Hey, thank you. You got to do it when the crawfish are in season. That's the secret.
And Faith, how do you pronounce this word? Shiite. All right. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Faith.
so much.
All right,
My
thank
best
you.
You've been a delight.
Thank you so
You've
much.
been a great guest for us, for sure.
Love you, Frank.
Love
and
you.
It's so nice to meet you, Billy.
Good luck.
Thank you very
Good luck
much.
for the remainder of hurricane season. I hope you get through it. It's got to be pretty brutal down there, doesn't it?
Oh my gosh, we've had the pandemic and then we've had hurricanes. Louisiana needs a break, in general, and we've got it. Contrary to what other people in our business, our world of, artsy stuff, we've got lots of very wonderful, artsy, wonderful people that are living down here, and by choice, whether it's their roots or whatever, and they make movies and they love the arts. And it's been rough. I was just shooting a movie down in New Orleans, and they had to stop halfway through, and hopefully they'll get to finish it, But it is what it is. But we're here because we love the state.
Yeah, and as you said, I'll be there for your podcast as long as we've got power.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
It's true.
Yeah. Thanks again, Faith.
Thank you.
Love you madly.
Thank you. Love you too.
All right. That's Faith Ford. Nice guess, huh, Billy?
That's no joke to having no electricity in Louisiana, because if you don't have air conditioning down there, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity.
Yeah, it is for sure. And they got some mighty big bugs down there.
They sure do. Yeah, they do. Mighty Big Bugs is right. Yeah, she was a great guest, and just delightful, like you said, and unpretentious. Just down earth.
Unpretentious. She again. I always say that I gauge people by how much they've changed, and I like them to change as little as possible, and as long as I've known them.
That's a pretty good adage,
and that's the way Faith has never.
That's a pretty good thing to live by.
Yep.
I mean, it was interesting. She said that Diane English had left the show after 5 years. I didn't know that.
Yeah, she left the show in the fifth year to go out and do her own things. She made a richer deal, and she developed the show for Jay Thomas, Love and War, and that ran for 3 years with Jay Thomas. And then
that was a pretty big shoes to fill. Who the hell came in? Was able to fill those shoes for the next 5 years? They must have had a team.
Well, Stephen Peterman and Gary Donzik.
Okay, there you go.
They stayed for 2 years, and then they went off to do their own show. So they probably had 3 or 4 executive producers after Diane left. But Steve and Gary did a good job also.
Oh, yeah.
As a matter of fact, I had dinner with Stephen and his wife last night.
Well, they had to do another good job because you got an extra 5 years out of it. That's a hell of a run, 10 years. That's a good run for a saloon, never mind for for a show. The 10 years is quite a run. And I love the Foofy thing. I mean, somebody named Foofy sounds like it should have 4 legs.
Oh, no. Foofy was an Albanian.
Oh, yeah.
He was an Albanian Billy O'Connor.
Oh, really? He was funny. He was a bar owner.
He was a bar owner.
That's what you got to be.
And, after having been in Los Angeles for so long where they don't go for a spit,
Really?
Oh, well, in L.A., it was fun to be in New York where every second or third one
was on the arm.
On the arm.
On the arm, yeah, the buybacks. Yeah, they don't go for nothing.
And,
in LA,
when I was working there, I lived in an apartment that was 2 blocks from the studio, so I could walk to work in Queens. So I could walk.
I'd stagger home.
So I could walk to work every day. So on weekends, I would go by George's, have a burger, and it was always on the arm.
Right.
Because I was feeding the crew there Thursdays and Fridays. Right. So we would take over the whole place for lunches.
You were bringing them in a ton of business.
I was bringing in a ton of business, and we were paying for, the drinks on show night. So we were doing land office business for him.
Oh, yeah, he loved you, without a doubt. Why wouldn't he?
So we still are friends to this day.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Foofy. It's pretty funny, an Albanian guy.
Foofy. I don't even really know what his regular. It's just, the name
You don't need one.
is,
You don't need
it's
one.
like Javelin Nikolic or something like that. But he's an Albanian for sure.
Well, like my old friend the Tinker. Nobody calls him Mike. Everybody calls him the Tinker.
Yep.
You go with the flow.
Yep. Let's get out of here.
All right, my brother. It was a great guest. I had a good time. Good time interviewing him.
We did that for sure.
All
Did
right,
that for
brother.
sure.
Thank you for
All right,
looking
Derek.
in.
Thank you, my friend. Derek, say goodnight.
Good night.
A man of few words, our third man in the booth. Terse
right.
as usual.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Next week's guest, actor-director, The Morning Show, Lost, and Suddenly Susan, Nestor Carbonell.
We'll see you next week.